Celtics Stuff Live.
This is Celtic Stuff Live on CLNS Radio, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for Boston sports. I'm Justin Poulin. With me is John Duke, and the Celtics will have a Game 7 tonight, Monday night, with the draft lotto coming up tomorrow. Very, very exciting. Hopefully there'll be a Game 1 just a couple of days after the draft lottery, and we can all keep this on a nice little run instead of waiting another month or month and a half into late June for draft night, and then obviously free agency soon to follow. I'd like to see this season continue. I know everybody listening to this show would as well, John, but pretty interesting game. Of all of the script, I guess, for every game in this series to date, Celtics go down big, can't win on the road, try to climb back in. This one was a back and forth. I really thought they were going to pull it out. Really seemed like they would, and obviously John Wall just hits the most insane three-pointer. Avery Bradley was right there on that play, just not enough of it. The hand needed to be a little bit more in his face, but you have to take your hat off. The guy hit a big shot.
Yeah, I think that you've got, in that situation, there's been a lot of criticism for Avery, I think, about not being close enough on Wall and not, look, he's a 29% shooter. If that's not the shot you give John Wall, what shot do you give him? The runner in the lane, the shot from 2 feet away. I mean, we've seen what John Wall can do with a full head of steam. That's not the shot you want. That's the shot he wants. It's great. He takes the shot. It wins the game. Great. Tip your cap to him. Move on. I understand that people are feeling, I think especially on Saturday, Friday night and Saturday, there's a lot of hurt feelings. And hey, look, I get it. People wanted to see the Celtics win. We want to see, clinch it and move on and all that. But look, let's be honest. I mean, you've got a situation where you've got one of the best guys at going to the back. It may be him and Westbrook, 1-2 in terms of the ability to go from 25 feet away and get to the bucket and no one be the wiser. That may be the list right there. Westbrook, let's put LeBron, Wall, and Westbrook. I'm not sure anybody else does it better than those three. And
I'll tell you this,
you're going to ask Bradley to play up on him. I mean, look, that's a good way for him to drive and kick to a much better shooter. And there was time for that shot without question.
Yeah, there was plenty of time. And as a matter of fact, there was one less second for the Celtics. And really, if they had needed an extra second, it was there. It just wasn't given to the C's. I'm not really all that upset about that either. I think they would have been, they had a foul to give. So, the way that all went down, it's a little tough. But I will say this. Of all the games that have frustrated me at points in this series, this one was the least frustrating. I really enjoyed the back and forth. I liked that it was pretty close for the most part, most of the way. It was a battle, and I thought the Celtics played pretty well. And you look at Avery Bradley, backs up a great performance in Game 5 with another 27 points. Al Horford continues to have a pretty excellent run. Was it his best game? No, but he still puts up 26 and 3, and you don't see any kind of lack of aggressiveness. Isaiah's been struggling, but he had a nice night, I thought. Amir Johnson, starting lineup, we can debate that till the cows come home. But even Jay Crowder was flirting a little bit with a triple-double. I still have criticism for Jay, mostly for not getting aggressive enough in the paint. I still see him, he's shooting threes and he's really just struggling to make three-point shots. Now, how long will that continue? I don't know. He only went 1 for 4 in Game 6, but he was 3 for 9 from the field. But he has a pretty difficult matchup, too. I mean, a lot of times he winds up defending Markieff Morris. And to your point, Bradley has had chased Wall around all game long. I don't think you can get too mad at him. Should he played a little bit closer, whatever. He played him all game long. He might have it wouldn't be surprising if he just was a step slow, too. Maybe he wanted to guard closer. You have to, as you just said, with John Wall, you have to give it to him. The guy hit a big shot, and he could have created something else for himself or somebody else. And that game, I guess probably the biggest reason people are frustrated is because it was a 3-pointer. So it took the lead. If you gave him the lane, the best he could have done was tie it, and there still might have been some time on the clock to get a game winner. Worst case scenario, go to overtime. But you gotta like your chances with a deep three. It's not like he was sitting right on the line.
I think that, yeah, and I think that was a long shot. I think my own personal thought is there was a lot of time left. He thought, Wall's going to take this shot with 0 time remaining. He's going to get something going to the basket or a 15-footer, and that's their best chance to win. I mean, I don't think that's crazy to think that the guy's going to try to take the best shot. He's not going to take the shot where he's 29%. They're going to take the shot where he's 45 or 50%. That's where he's going to shoot and has the ability to do so. And as the other team's best player, the fact that he just spotted up from 25, 26 feet, basically off the inbound pass, I think that took a Bradley off guard. And as you said, I think maybe you could criticize him for possibly being a bit unready, but I think it's picking nits at that point. I mean, look, let's look at this for what it is. The Celtics have played badly in Washington for the last 12 months. They have not had a good season of games in Washington. This game, they did what they had to do to get this game into a position where they could have won it. They figured out how Washington likes to blitz the pick and roll, minus that turnover Isaiah had that everyone wants to talk about. They figured out how to defend this team generally. They held them to probably a low. They've done what they've had to do in Washington, and they got to the point where they were one play away from winning it. And so look, you're going to take a 30%, not even a 30% shooter from 3 is going to be the guy to turn it around. I mean, look, I'm just going to say, let's tip our cap to what the Celtics did, tip our cap to John Wall for what his shot. But I like the trend line for the Boston Celtics going
That's
into
what
Game
I was
7.
just going to say. The trend, if you go back to Wednesday night's game, Game 5, we had an awesome post-game show. And as a matter of fact, I dumped off around midnight, I think, and it just kept going, as I learned later. And Bobby Manning calling into the show, and I think Nick Sacento and you, all the three of you must have carried it on for a while. But if you look at that game, the Celtics just dominated the whole way through. That was the first time that they'd really dominated in the postseason against the Wizards. And then, instead of getting their butts handed to them in Washington, they play a closely contested game. As long as they are healthy, which Avery Bradley appears to be now, and they have plenty of energy in the tank, which in a Game 7 is typically not an issue, and they've had plenty of rest, I also like their chances in Game 7, but let's go back to Game 5 real quick, because that's the most recent. That was another game that has happened since we last talked to you here on Celtics Stuff Live. They were just dominant at home. And if they carry that over to Game 7, and I think Washington will have fight in them for sure, but if they play as well as they did in Game 5 at home in front of that crowd in Game 7, it's going to take a lot more than a miracle 3-pointer at the buzzer for the Washington Wizards to take this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, neither bench came out strong, right? I mean, we've been seeing the Wizards bench has played well at home all season long. Not so in Game 6. So it really was about the starters. And the Celtics starters, Isaiah didn't shoot the Celtics shot terribly. Right? They had 30% in the first half. Terrible shooting. They couldn't get out of their own way in terms of shooting the ball. Yet they only were it was a 1-point game at halftime. This game was winnable. They played a decent second half, not perfect. Didn't get any contribution from the bench. And I think that was really the death knell for the Celtics. They didn't get enough of a bounce when Wall went to the bench at the start of the fourth quarter. The Celtics didn't get that bounce they needed. And so while, yes, IT got those 5 points there at the end, they really needed that little bit of cushion they could have gotten when Wall came out. If anything, actually, it kind of turned in the other direction and things started falling a bit towards Washington's way. So I think, the ebbs and flows of Game 6 were really interesting, but it was much more a battle, an even battle. I don't see that going into Game 7. I see Game 7 being a situation where not only are the Celtics reserves going to play to their capacity in front of a home crowd, but I think the roof is going to come off the sucker tomorrow night, or I should say tonight here at the TD Garden. I think the fans are going to be unbelievable.
Lit.
I think they're going to be lit, literally, and in a liquid refreshment format. They will be lit in that way as well. It's going to be bananas. A lot of people calling into work Tuesday morning.
I was just going to say there's going to be a lot of small to medium sized business owners. Corporate, they don't care. There's going to be a lot of small and medium sized business owners are going to be frustrated.
Yep.
That the events of Game 7 have slowed down their progress for the week. But hey, real quick, station identification. Follow Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow your host, me, at CSL_Justin. John's at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Radio network is at CLNS Radio, and the Facebook page, facebook.com/CLNS fans. Download the CLNS Radio app for iOS and Android. Simply go to your app marketplace and search CLNS Radio. CLNS Radio's YouTube channel, which is just always driving great content, youtube.com/CLNS Radio, high definition, full length locker room interviews, and the Garden Report with Jared Weiss. We've actually seen, our buddy Nick Gelso on the Garden Report quite a bit in this postseason. And, I love seeing Nick. He's getting more and more polished, John, alongside Jimmy Toscano and Jared.
I think he's bringing back the old days. He's at this point, he's gone to corporate, right? He's Mr. CLNS Radio. He's done all this. And, now, we remember the early days of Nick Gelso, podcast host. And, hey, listen, it's nice to see the guy come out of the boardroom and come back behind the mic. It's great to have him back out there.
Yeah, no doubt it is. Excellent businessman, though, the way he's driving this CLNS media now, moving forward. So good that he's actively involved in the nuts and bolts of it and enjoying, some of the, or reaping the benefits of the hard work and being able to go to those games. So I don't know if we even want to chime in on the whole wearing black thing. I feel like we should briefly. I did not like it. The minute I heard about it, I thought to myself, you're going to have to win this game. And it's kind of a good way to psych yourself up, because I think they're not stupid. They knew that's kind of, that was going to be the criticism. If they're going to do that, they have to play like it. So on that side of things, they did play like it. I don't think we got a lackluster effort from the Celtics. It's unfortunate they didn't win, but if they were trying to motivate themselves by essentially doing the Babe Ruth and pointing for the fences, then it worked. It didn't work enough to win the game, but I didn't like it just because I did think it was a little petty. Honestly, John, I thought it was a little petty.
Well, I guess I come from a couple different places on it. One, I think that it's great that I like the fact that they had confidence going to Game 6. That was what it said to me most of all. It's like, okay, you know what? We're ready to play this game. We're ready to go. We've done all we can. We're ready. We know what we need to do to win this game. And on that score, I don't think they came up short. Yes, they lost the game, but they didn't play like they played throughout all of those.
Yeah, if they had laid an egg,
battles,
we'd be blasting them right now.
Right. I think to me that's an important distinction to make. It's not like, oh, we're going to be tough, and then just not show up. That's a different story. They showed up, and did what they had to do, and they had a close game on the road, Game 6. I mean, the odds were in their favor.
Really, a game they should have won. They were in the driver's seat with just a little over a minute remaining.
Absolutely. So on that end, I don't like it. It doesn't bother me too much, because I think it speaks to their, where they are. The other piece of it, though, that bothers me is it does open the door for, the whole thing with the Wizards doing this in winter looked so stupid to begin with. A regular season game in January to do this, right? I mean, come on, okay? Playoffs, I get. There's a higher status to what we're talking about here. But then for Wizards,
that's precisely why the Celtics thought it was okay, right?
Well,
because that was a I don't want to say meaningless, but essentially, the Wizards were on a run at the time, and so they were definitely feeling it, and they were going after it, and they were just building their confidence. But it was, as you say, a fairly meaningless mid-season game. And you're right, for the postseason to try to motivate, do whatever you can, scrap, claw, it is a little bit more acceptable.
I think so. And I think that bring that energy, bring that confidence to the game, no problem. I think what bothers me about it is, one, okay, you lose the game and you're going to hear the criticism. And I feel like they should have been a little more upfront about the fact, we wore it. We felt confident going in. We still feel confident going into Game 7. Doesn't change anything. We want to send these guys home. That's the answer. That's what you say. Instead, it was, the whole thing, well, we weren't so, no one knew about it. And, it was a little weird. It was a little weak on that end. But look, these guys aren't.
Oh, you mean you don't like that they didn't stand behind it?
Yeah, I felt like
if you're going to go alpha, you got to just throw it right out there and be like, yep.
Yeah, you know what? We did it, and, hey, we lost, but we still believe we're going to take these guys down in 7, and that's what this is about. We're confident in ourselves. I think that's where they should have gone with it. But what bothers me most about all this are the people after the fact, one, who said this had anything to do with the game, and then two, those after the game who were criticizing the Celtics for doing it, particularly Wizards fans, or the Wizards themselves, like Markieff Morris, saying that that this was something that the Wizards were proving that they wanted to be like, that the Celtics wanted to be like the Wizards. No. Don't get it twisted, my man. I mean, what's going on here is this is a real game, and what you were playing was a regular season game. It was meaningless, and to somehow say, well, the Celtics look, kind of, studio gangsters is what I've heard a lot. Kind of, they're not really, about that life. To use Jimmy Butler's comments. Look. What do you suppose? I mean, look, they lost. It happens. But, the Wizards did this in a meaningless game in January. Like, you can't
Yeah, this was a shot back across the bow. Absolutely. But you know what? Think about the talk. Last time it was Gortat talking smack about, the Celtics and not being tough enough, right? Isn't that what he said? He's basically saying, what did Gortat say after Game 2 or Game 3? I can't remember.
Was it you mean the Bradley stuff, where you were saying that Bradley, so Bradley was gonna, Bradley said if he screened him again like that, he was gonna go through him or something like that.
Go. Yeah,
he was gonna, F him up, I suppose, is what the words were.
But there's a lot of talk in this series. I mean, their rivalry. Yeah. I don't think it's really not contrived. No, this is what it was. Gortat basically said it wasn't a rivalry, and the Celtics were creating it. That's what it was. I lost my train of thought there for a second, but that was his shot. It was like, oh yeah, it's not really a rivalry. And then here we have Morris saying, well, they just want to be like us. So they're sort of manufacturing this way of elevating themselves above the Celtics, which I think is pretty interesting. The whole smack talk, and the Celtics instead say, we're just going to keep our mouths shut, but we're going to wear black and be like, keep talking, boys, keep talking. I know everybody's talking in this series, but about that, that particular getting ready for Game 6, they did get questioned extensively before the game. I still think it's petty, but I think you do whatever you got to do to try to get up for a game. I do think the Celtics are going to crush in Game 7. I really do. But the question is going to come down a little bit, speaking of not about that life, to Marcus Smart, because we've got to get a performance out of this guy. He's got to get back on track.
I felt like Game 6 was going to be that game. I tweeted it that night. I felt like I was on a good roll there with tweets. That was one that didn't come true Friday night. I felt like he's starting to get his confidence back. And then he got to the foul line. He missed either one of two or both free throws. I think it was one of two. And that's where that his confidence has shown to me to be inside the biggest gap right now is he's going to the foul line without any sort of confidence at all. And that's something that's not Marcus like. That we've seen him, throughout his career, he's actually shot the ball pretty well, from the stripe. And
he's also shot well in the post, and he's having the same issue. He's like coming up a little, maybe I'd say a foot to 2 feet shy. Mm-hmm. And I know he doesn't throw down thunderous dunks, but he does tend to finish a lot closer to the rim, and he really pauses to go inside. And listen, I think Morris and Gortat are good defenders, but they're not that good that when Marcus is in one-on-one and he's already gotten around his man, and the big is just sliding over to block room, he shouldn't pull. He doesn't pull up though. Like if he pulled up into a jumper and just did it, that'd be different too. But he kind of goes into awkward form and then doesn't know what he kind of looks a little bit more like Jaylen Brown when Jaylen drives into traffic than he does Marcus Smart, who has posted up big men that got 4 or 5 inches on him.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's between the ears right now for him. It really is. I mean, he's just defensively and the hustle plays, he's still making them with 75% of the regularity that we saw throughout the regular season. But offensively, he's really in a funk. He's still making some nice passes here and there, but it's just we haven't seen that breakout performance. And I think it's going to need to be something at home right now. I think he's going to need that home crowd to urge him on. Although, to his credit, he's actually been a guy who's done a lot of his best performances on the road. Certainly in Oklahoma City, as we've known, Houston, Dallas. I mean, when he plays close to his home, his real home, he's played even better. Obviously, that's not happening in this series. We're waiting for that situation for him to come in the game and really take over. I don't know if it's the pressure. I don't know if it's his role is minimized and because of what's going on. And we talked quite a bit about this in our show last week. They're blitzing IT and then he's got to make a pass and find a guy who can shoot and make a basket, right? It's pass or rescreen and then pass out of it and find somebody who can create or even there's a lot of back screening going on. That's not great because it's a situation that's tailor-made for Avery Bradley to get the ball or Crowder to be open. And unfortunately, in both scenarios, you're asking Marcus to really not do the creating, which is what he's best at in an offensive set. You're really forcing him to be, kind of just a guy. And if he's the spot-up guy, that's not the place that Marcus Smart feels most comfortable. And for a guy whose confidence might be a little bit waning, or certainly not at its highest point, it's not helpful in any respect.
No, and I don't want to go back to the whole needing a big man thing, but boy, wouldn't it be nice if they had a big man. Amir, he did have a nice game 5. There's no doubt. He had a decent game 5, but boy, if they could have somebody just who could shoot a little bit and be a good defender in the post. And I know Al Horford's providing that, but I'm thinking a slightly different skill set. But man, if they could it's the small lineup that forces Marcus into that situation you just described. Instead of just engineering the second unit, he has to be out there with the first unit a lot more than maybe they would like. And we've talked about it all season. He's essentially playing out of position. And because, as you mentioned, he's not creating. And he really he does need to be in that creator role. He needs to have a shooter next to him. We've loved the Marcus Smart, Terry Rozier combination when they're anchoring that second unit, which is supposed to be one of the biggest strengths in this series against the Washington Wizards. And it's dwindling a little bit there. It's sort of surprising the way that it's dwindling. And Terry Rozier finally didn't have a great game in Game 6 either.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. It's been and he actually didn't have a great game 5. Terry did not play with the same level of ability. He got pulled out once in game 5 for a blown assignment. Well, it was the blown layup actually is what did. He came and they were
and
well
he's had
ahead,
several of those.
but he had the layup where he tried to get far too fancy, and something Celtics fans were becoming all too accustomed with, and quick hook. And I hope that didn't, kind of pull Terry off his game permanently, that hook. But, look, you gotta understand situation, and that's what Brad's trying to do with him. So we need, the Celtics need to have him back in game 7 to harass. He's been so effective in this series. I'm not sure he will be as effective if they were able to move on against Cleveland, because I think of the size of Cleveland's guards is going to be a problem for them. Or a problem for Terry's, playing time. I think they're going to be looking much more to Jaylen Brown, I think, but this is,
and
they need a much better,
and harken back to the beginning of the season when Jaylen had a nice little early in the year performance against LeBron. And you know what? Maybe we table right there. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll really preview Game 7, some of our predictions, maybe look a little bit beyond that. We have to talk about the lottery and something else that happened on Sunday afternoon into the evening. The Kawhi Leonard ankle injuries, Zaza Pachulia sort of taking a few extra steps, and maybe there is a double standard being set out there amongst the fan base between Al Horford and Zaza. So we're going to talk about that when we come back in the second half. First, it's playoff season, and having the right players on the court will be the key to success. That sharp outside shooter or power rebounder can be the difference between winning and losing. Business? Not so different. Your company needs the right people to be the best. And where do you go to find the top talent? You can't find the best candidates by posting your job on just one site. You need to post on all of the top job sites. And now you can with ZipRecruiter. At ZipRecruiter.com, you can post your job to 100 plus job sites with only a click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your position. That's why ZipRecruiter is different, and unlike the other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates to find you. It finds them for you. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in less than 24 hours. No juggling numerous emails or calls to your office. You simply screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes nationwide. And right now, our listeners can start forming their own winning team on ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. That's ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. Try it for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. Okay, John, so right before we went to the break, we were sort of talking, maybe almost previewing Game 7, really breaking down the performance of the bench and who needs to step up. But do you have any predictions for Game 7, how you think this will go down? I know we kind of already said you thought that it would be off the hook and the fan base would be lit, and then that would drive them to a win. And I tend to agree, but are there any players that you think, or a player that we really need to see step up that'll help bring this one home?
Well, first of all, I want to say that because it's off the hook and it's lit, we're really trying to appeal to our younger demographic. So I hope the kids enjoy that.
Nobody would know I'm in my 40s. Right.
Oh, well, so yeah, I mean, we were not off the chain. We were lit, kids. Anyway, no, I think that there's a lot there to like, going into Game 7. We talked a little bit about Rozier, we talked Smart, we talked not so much about Brown. I think the bench generally is going to have to step up. But the one guy that I think that has done the most damage for the Celtics looking at the totality of this series, but in particular the home games, has been Kelly Olynyk. Kelly has been matched up with either Jan Mahinmi later in the series, earlier on with Jason Smith, who's a little slowed with a calf injury. And in all of those instances, Kelly's been able to use his versatility offensively to really punish the Wizards in those bench lineups, either in hitting threes and kind of pulling them from the basket, or putting the ball on the floor and kind of driving on the slower defenders. He's done really well in punishing the Wizards defense in that manner. In Game 6 in particular, there was a lot of hesitancy in Kelly, which is never a good sign. That's something we all, almost from the moment he steps on the court, you can tell how he's feeling and how he's going. From the moment he misses his
first three-pointer.
Absolutely.
That first shot, and I think we talked about this last season too, but sure. I know that this has come up a couple of times, and definitely this year. If he misses that first three-pointer, it's a tone setter. If that drops like rain, it is all done. He all of a sudden is going out there. To your point too, it says something that on that final possession with just a few seconds left, they're lobbing it in because he's had some creative finishes around the rim in this series. And when he gets that first three-pointer, if that one's wet, then all of a sudden he also plays much better in the post.
Totally. Yeah. And, I'd almost love to try to get him some shots closer to the basket so he's feeling it a little bit more. Whether it's matched up with Morris or kind of in a switch there on Jan Mahinmi or what have you, get him at the high post and let him kind of put it on the floor and get a step on one of those guys. I think it'd work out well for him. They need a powerful, okay, very powerful is overselling, but they need a confident Kelly Olynyk in Game 7. They need him to say, look, I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can do. The double clutching on the pass to the corner, that type of stuff is just, it kills the flow of the offense. It kills where they're going. There's a lot of people out there. I mean, we've heard from them ever since the guy's been here who've been unimpressed with Kelly Olynyk's game and do not see any value in what he provides. And I think that's short-sighted. I think Kelly has a world of ability. He's a much better defensive player than people give him credit for. But his maddening inconsistency is the real culprit of his issues. And when he plays well, he plays fantastic. And when he doesn't play well, you would be surprised that he's even a basketball player.
Well, it's the hesitation.
We need the good Kelly.
Yeah, and it's the hesitation. The only time one of my things for Kelly would be if you're hesitating on the shot, then make it a full pump fake, show and go right into the lane. If you're not taking the shot, then just pump fake and go. Because what kills is when he hesitates and then he doesn't make a pass, he doesn't make a pump fake, he doesn't shoot the ball, and he doesn't drive. It really stagnates the entire offense because it should be a more confident threat. And it should look like Kelly is the one who's making the choice not to shoot the ball. But really, what it looks like when he hesitates like that is that Washington got into his head. And I think it actually makes them feel confident because you're supposed to close him out, and they're going to stop closing him out if they see hesitancy when he's open enough to shoot it.
Totally. And and as you said, this is not something that the Wizards defense has figured out Kelly Olynyk. They have no idea what to do with Kelly Olynyk. This is going to sound ridiculous. I'm probably going to take a lot of crap for this later on. But the only person who stops Kelly Olynyk often is Kelly Olynyk himself. And I think that's ultimately true. The best defender is him. And if he's playing to his capacity, how often do you see defenders house him? I mean, you really don't see that happen very often. I mean, certainly defensively, there are times he's, overpowered or shows no effort, particularly on the boards. And you're just like, well, that's Kelly. And you shrug your shoulders. But offensively, there's very few players who can stop him because of the array of ability that he has and the scope of his game. I don't know what that means for him in free agency, but I think that he, in this series in particular, but also maybe in the next series, if they are lucky enough to move ahead here in Game 7 tonight, I think he is a guy who is an X factor that very few teams have an answer for.
It's almost like he thinks he's supposed to make every shot or he's letting the team down. It's almost like he takes it so serious, and ultimately, I don't care if he misses stuff at the rim as long as he's a threat in there. He forgets that, I think, or he doesn't realize that think about a couple of times earlier in the series when they threw the ball over the top of the defense, and then he had all these creative finishes. Well, now Washington can't just sag off and load up on the perimeter like they like to do. And that's where that needs to keep coming up. They need to do that more and more and more. And when he is, even if he misses, it's what it sets up for Isaiah. It's what it, you talked a lot about the back screens, but having him underneath there and then running an action along the baseline, just to get some threat down low and a couple of different passes that might go in that way. That's what opens up everything on the perimeter. It collapses the defense. He has to do that. And nobody's asking him, hey, the bounce is real, to throw down monstrous dunks, right? They just be a threat. Be a threat down there. Mm-hmm. And don't, that would be my only advice to Kelly. I have a feeling he gets down on himself. Why don't we talk a little bit about what might be coming up on Tuesday, or what might be the outcome of Tuesday's draft lottery in just a second. But just real quick, John, how do you think this goes in Game 7? I'm going to predict that the Celtics, it's really close all the way to the last 4 minutes, and then I actually think they pull away and have it in hand with maybe about 90 seconds to 2 minutes left on the clock.
Okay, so let's take a very quick, short pat on the back for you and I. We call this as a 7-game series from the jump. We saw this going the whole way, and I remember you and I talking about the fact that, look, they could win this in 6, they could win it in 5, and I think, had things gone a different way, they might have. But winning it in Washington was going to be hard, and I think some of those who want to criticize the Celtics for not having pulled it out on Friday night are not appreciative of how good Washington is at home. And one of the best records in all of basketball, particularly since January 1st. I mean, they have one of the best records, especially home records, in all of basketball. So this was a hard place to win a game. This is a front-running team that feels good at home, and the Celtics were I'm going to say a fluke 3-point shot with very little time remaining of winning this game. So where do I see this going? I think the Celtics are going to win. I think they're going to win big. I think it's going to be Geno time. I think they're going to put the wood to the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards acted like they won the championship on Friday night. They were so ebullient. They had the streamers coming down. John Wall's sending out Instagrams and all this stuff. And they feel like they've won. When I look at all their comments, I don't think any of them have mentioned Game 7 since Friday night. I don't think anybody's talked about Game 7. So I think this is a situation where the Celtics are focused, laser focused. The fans are going to be on the Wizards. I think and they're not going to let up. I think this is going to be a big win. I think it's going to be Geno time, and we're going to be talking about LeBron James on our next show.
Well, I certainly hope so. I have one concern, and that is that the calls may not go the Celtics' way in this home game. And
really?
Yeah. Yep. And because sort of what you just talked about with John Wall, I think there is an exciting John Wall versus LeBron James storyline there. And I know there's a little bit of spunk between the Celtics and LeBron said good things about Brad Stevens. We won't have a shortage of storylines if the Celtics go on and face the Cavs. And obviously the Celtics took the number 1 seed from the Cavaliers down the stretches. They were trying to get healthy for the postseason, and they've definitely kept their minutes down with 2 straight sweeps in the first and second round. So the Cavs are positioned well that way. But I think there may be a little bit more of that, well, the best player in this series, that team usually wins. There is a little sneak attack here I'm a little concerned about with the Celtics. I don't think they'll come out flat. I'm just saying, what if a couple of key players, what if Avery Bradley gets into foul trouble? What if Jay Crowder gets into foul trouble? The way that the bench is played, if they don't step up, it would take a lot of things for it to move that way. But if those stars aligned, the bench doesn't improve, and either Jay Crowder or Avery Bradley get into foul trouble, and then John Wall starts wreaking havoc and he's getting to the line at ease. As much as I've said use your fouls, that's not what I would do in Game 7.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, you can't account for what referees are going to do. And I thought the officiating on Friday night was not great at times. They called it tight, then they called it loose, and then they called it tightly. Gortat was picked up some fouls that seemed to me were a little bit bizarre, given where he stands but either way, I do think that the bench is going to have a much stronger role in this game. And I think if it's called tightly, that helps the Celtics. The more you see of Jaylen Brown and Olynyk and Rozier, I think that's good for Boston, because I think that means that, one, they feel like they can play a little bit from behind, or not from behind, but ahead. And I think the other piece of it is it means that they can get some rest for their starters. And so that when they're going up against the Wizards starters, which is a good starting five, we got to give them credit for what they are. They're a little bit more rested. They have a little bit more to them. The Wizards used 2-minute stretch there in the fourth quarter where they sat Wall. Other than that, he played the whole fourth quarter.
And they closed the gap.
Half.
That was pretty key. They closed the gap while he sat on the bench. It should have been a moment where the Celtics pulled away and made it that much harder on him when he came back, and instead they left the door open. So that's how those things could happen in Game 7 for sure. All right, let's do this. Let's move on. 2 more topics we want to hit. We'll talk about Kawhi and Zaza in a minute, but the draft lotteries Tuesday night, the Celtics obviously have the best odds to get the number 1 pick. Wouldn't that be crazy to win a Game 7 on Monday or tonight, and the draft lottery then get the number 1 pick, and the next thing you know, it's in a series against Cleveland, and not only do you have, the possibility, again, could be low, but possibility of going to the NBA Finals, and then coming right out and taking the first overall selection, most likely Markelle Fultz. That would be insane, and I know, John, you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the quote from Chad Ford, which ties in very nicely with Lonzo Ball and that whole narrative. And you and I, neither of us have really been all that high on Lonzo Ball this season, but I'll just read the Chad Ford quote. Several agents told me that they were considering holding their clients out of workouts with the Boston Celtics as well. The Celtics currently have the best odds of winning the number 1 pick. Unlike the Kings, they have one of the most respected front offices and coaching staffs in the league. I have deep respect for the Celtics, one agent said. They may have the best GM and head coach in the league, but I'd have to understand what the plan would be for my client before I let them come. They are loaded at every position. There's a real danger that they take a player and either he plays a limited role off the bench or he becomes an asset to be traded to a situation that we're uncomfortable with. It's tough. And John, I think it's the second half of that. I think if the player is as good as they think that player is, they'll get playing time, right? And Markelle Fultz is not going to have a problem getting playing time, I don't think. Yes, guard loaded, but he's tall, he's long, and they need another scorer. The bigger issue is, and this is a real one with the Celtics because of the whole idea that their offseason plans may have some trades involved after signing a max free agent. But that whole, or he becomes an asset to be traded to a situation that we're uncomfortable with. Everybody wants to control their destiny. I'll throw this back to you, especially as it relates to Lonzo Ball. His dad really trying to control his destiny and steer him to the Lakers. A lot of Celtics fans not loving Lonzo Ball as a pick either. But if he winds up being the best pick in this draft and the Celtics pass on him with the number 1 pick, you know it's going to come back that, they passed on him because he didn't want to play for the Celtics. His dad wanted to stay in LA, and the whole marketing thing that they've been setting up for the Ball family and the brothers themselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's everyone uses the LA thing. Oh, Paul George, he wants to play in LA, so nobody else should touch him. I mean, how many times have we seen LA used as a wedge to drive people different places? We saw with LaMarcus Aldridge, we saw it with KG. We hear this all the time. LA is almost the new New York. It used to be, until New York became such a dumpster fire of a team, that everyone would use the Knicks as, the Knicks are interested. The Knicks are going to spend money. The Knicks are going to do this. And time again, we see players and teams that they go away from the Lakers. Now that could change now that Rob Pelinka is running things with Magic, and they may have a much more competent group of executives running things over there. But I just see LA used as such a wedge piece. I don't think Danny Ainge is scared of that at all. I don't think he should be. I think he should take the best player available, whether it's Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Josh Jackson, Jason Tatum. It doesn't matter to me who it is. I think that there is a legit concern that the Celtics have. Look, we know every option is on the table. There's 1 through 100 options that Danny Ainge has available to him, or possibilities available to him. And I don't know what direction they're going to go in, but look, if we're going to know a lot more after Tuesday night. Okay.
Do you think the draft workouts are really going to have an influence in this draft? Or do you think the Celtics pretty much already know the order that they're most likely? And the real concern is medical information, I think. Not that there's a flag on anybody that they would draft. Harry Giles' medical info will dictate a lot about where he goes, obviously. Mm-hmm. But as far as the top 4 guys in this draft, none of them really have any health concerns, any health risk or issue. So I'm not so sure that, I guess Tatum got a little bit of a slow start this season, but
due to injury though.
What's that?
It was due to injury though.
No, that's my point. So as far as the medical information goes, there might be a question mark there, but it's a pretty low risk, minor question mark. There's nobody that's really got major red flags that you may or may not want to take. And so you're going to want that info just to be safe, and they might be denied that info, but we also know in this league that info tends to leak. I feel like there's some partnerships with medical information amongst clubs too.
Well, and I would probably add to that not only is there partnerships with teams, there's partnerships with particular agents too. So let's parse the comment, right? So they're saying this one agent says, I have deep respect for the Celtics, but they have, they blah, 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 they're good, but they're loaded and da, 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 da. And the top says several agents told me they were considering holding several agents were told they were considering holding their agents out. Now, that doesn't say that the Celtics, that they're holding out, that we're the agents for Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, Jackson, and Tatum are. He's saying several agents they're holding their clients out. They're not saying they're the top players. So I think a lot of us were putting the two together. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, that it's for the top guys. It might be guys for guys like Giles, for their second round picks, because that's certainly a situation where later on you're going to have an issue. I guess my point is, I'm not worried about if I'm the Celtics. If they get number one, let's talk about what it means. If they get number one, it's Markelle Fultz. End of story, right? And Markelle Fultz is going to know what the deal is. They're not going to string him along like they did with Wiggins. That was the deal with Wiggins going back, to the Cleveland year, where basically they get Wiggins, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, don't get too comfortable, Andrew. And then of course the whole deal happens with Kevin Love, which was kind of an unfortunate situation. I don't think that's going to happen here, but the possibility exists. If it's 2, 3, or 4, there's a chance they might trade it. Especially if it's 3 or 4. But what are you going to do? You're going to go to the Bulls. You're going to go to Indiana. Those are well-run franchises. It's not like you're going to send them to the Kings. So, I just feel like this is much ado about nothing, quite frankly, and I don't think it's going to impact Danny Ainge one iota. He would have taken Porzingis without the medicals. He would have taken Embiid without, even if he didn't get the medicals. he knows, he's seen these guys. If we were the Knicks and we have a front office that doesn't do these sort of checks of what needs to be done, I'd be a lot more concerned about this. But the Celtics do their homework. They know these guys. They've already met with Fultz and did so last week. I'm not worried about this one bit.
No, I'm not really worried about it either. The only thing I will say too, though, is interesting because we picked it up off the Comcast Sportsnet page as well, and they cited Jaylen Brown and played minutes, etc. And yes, they are loaded, and Jaylen Brown did come off the bench this year, but he actually got quite a bit of significant minutes considering. Did he start and play, 25 minutes a night, night in and night out? No, but every rookie has to go through an adjustment, and it's typically that first off season when they really start to get their game where it needs to be in the pros. Any player who can walk in year one as a rookie and deserve playing time and really contribute isn't going to have a problem getting that with the Celtics. Any player who can come in and rock the NBA year one is not going to have a problem with playing time on the Celtics. Jaylen Brown needs some polish. He needs some experience. We love the athleticism, but let's face it, I am really intrigued to see what he looks like when he comes back after his first offseason. And most players are that way, but there are a few that are electric. And when they come into the league, they're ready to go. And the Celtics aren't going to put somebody like that on the bench anyway.
Well, and did you see the comment that Jaylen Brown made? I think it was after the Game 5 win, where he's like, I would want to be any other place. I could have gone somewhere else and played a lot more, but being right here in the middle of a playoff battle and getting, and I'm paraphrasing here greatly, getting these minutes and being on this team in the Eastern, on a chance of getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, I wouldn't beat that. I couldn't top that anywhere else. And so that's the counterpoint to the player.
Think about how those players, look at their usage rates when they go into the league and they just start taking a pounding. Look at Brandon Roy. I mean, that guy, I know it's kind of unfortunate with his knees, but remember, he was incredible coming into the league. All of a sudden, he was Rookie of the Year and, he was lighting it up. But, I think there's something to be said for somebody like Jaylen coming in when he's not quite 100% ready to contribute, not just taking the grind of the NBA season right out of the gate. We're actually saving some miles on him for when he's got a little added polish. And there's nothing wrong with that. And again, if there's a player, and I think Markelle Fultz might be the only one I really look at and say fairly confidently, I know the defense is going to need some work, but if there's a player who can come into this squad right away and just light it up, even if it is a little bit heavily leaned towards the offense, that's what this team needs. He's going to play. Playing time will not be an issue for a player such like that. So let's just go ahead and ask, let's flip right. Let's just jump right off of that. What if we hear the Tommy Heinsohn, and I just want to shout, I want to make sure our listeners know that we are going to record a podcast after the draft lottery, so you'll be able to download that on Wednesday morning this week. So stay tuned, because if it is a Tommy Heinsohn, we'll have our reaction. I'm not sure that I'm all that worried about it. I'm not. I love Fultz, but I'm not sold on Fultz being the end-all, be-all for the Celtics. What will be interesting is if they get the number 2 pick in light of what we were just talking about.
I'd love to say that I'm going to be, it's fine, no worries, everything is fine. We ended up with the 4th pick, which is the worst possible position, and what can you do? And I'm going to be disappointed. I will. Just because, look, when you're in that, we have that potential. It's really hard. It's really hard to not kind of focus on that. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard not to be disappointed. But listen.
Well, hold on. Wait,
You're right.
Can I ask you why you would be disappointed? Because I'm going to look at this from two different angles. One is, screwed again. Which really maybe has no bearing on, we want the Celtics to have the ability to make the choice that they want to make. The best player that they see in this draft that they're going to be able to take them. Maybe even there's some trade factor in there, and we say we want the number 1 pick because that'll allow us to get a Paul George or a Jimmy Butler. But are you really going to go and be disappointed because of the player you might not get? Or is it really just, we've been here so many times, there was the Yi Jinlian, Jeff Green draft, and by God, it's happened again.
Well, no, I'm done with all that fatalism crap that we saw, most famously with the Red Sox fans. I mean, I don't do that. It's just that the avenues for the Celtics are so much better with the number 1 versus the number 4. Making the trade with just the number 1 pick and one piece rather than the number 4 pick and several pieces, to make a trade, or just having the top choice to get whoever you want. I mean, it's just the avenues are just so much easier. Does that mean Markelle Fultz, if they take the pick, does it mean Markelle Fultz is absolutely, without a question, going to be a better pro than Jason Tatum? No, it doesn't. But I would much rather be in the position of having taken the number 1 pick and then, seeing what happens rather than going to the number 4 pick and feeling like, okay, well, it might work out like Jaylen Brown did with the guy with a lot of potential, but we'll see, and maybe you trade it, maybe you don't. But if you get number 1, things just kind of crystallize. They become a lot clearer, and I think that's one thing I was really hoping for out of this, is that the paths become clearer. And, look, I'm going to do it. I just hit Tankathon here. I hit the sim lottery. And just so you know, just so we're prepared for what's going to happen, Boston 1, Phoenix 2, Philly 3, and Philly 4. So if that's what happens,
insane.
I'm cool with that.
That is so insane.
I'm cool
Think
with
about
that entirely.
Just real quick with that though. All right, of course you're good with it. It's number 1. I do think the Celtics are going to get
pick. By the way,
right
under that scenario too.
Which I knew that, which would be gorgeous, and I want to talk about the 2 consecutive Philly picks in that scenario too. Except to say that first to say that I lost my train of thought. So I'll just talk about Philly, and then I'll think about the other. Oh, I think the Celtics are going to end up. I think they're going to get leapfrogged, and I think they're going to land at 2 or 3. And more likely, I think they land at 2. And then I'm just hoping that whoever leapfrogs likes Lonzo Ball. But the 2 Philly picks, with the Lakers getting screwed in that deal, who do they select? Because most likely, the 2 best players available are going to be Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum. And when you look at the construct with Ben Simmons already on that roster, and you just look at how they're made up, like, they really want to be able to draft a guard. So if that lottery situation plays out and they get 3 and 4 and Ball and Fultz go 1 and 2, how hilarious is that? And then are they going to look to somebody like De'Aaron Fox? Are they going to make, and look, Fox is a good player, but I think the top 4 are pretty consensus. I don't think, you might flip Tatum and Jackson. There's a few people who might do that. Most people don't. But I think those top 4 are sort of like the locked 4. I think everybody looks at it that there's a drop-off at number 5. So that could make things really interesting if that Tankathon result that you just got played out and it was Philly at 3 and 4 would be hilarious.
It'd be great. Well, and if Boston, let's say, I think without question it's Fultz's 1. If Celtics get 2, then you're right. Then you see, okay, who goes ahead of them? I think there are scenarios in which Fultz is not the pick, I think the Lakers, there's a possibility that Magic does fall in love with Lonzo Ball. So I don't think it's
You're
beyond
my density.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Thank you. We're going to have to get that as a soundbite clip for the show, because if that does happen, that will be, as Fultz and Lonzo Ball go into the future to revive the Celtics-Lakers rivalry, the "You Are My Density" clip will be our guilty pleasure on Celtics Stuff Live.
No question. If they go, there's a potential that they pass over and they let Fultz drop, right? If Philly goes 3-4 like that, you got to feel like they're going to say, look, Boston, let's make you an offer, right? To get up to 2. Because, I mean, maybe not. I just feel like with Colangelo, he's worked with Ainge. There's got to be a trade there for Colangelo and Ainge to do that allows Boston to drop down to 3, allows Philly to move up to 2. They take their point guard. Boston gets one of those wings and something else. I can't imagine it's 3-4 would go for 2, but who knows? That would be a wild trade. Maybe Boston has to throw more in to do that. But can you imagine they get 2 and they trade to get 3-4 and Boston ends up with
we didn't leave any time for the Kawhi Zaza, but I'm going to throw another one. What if it was 2 and Smart for pick 3 and 4? Would you do that?
I would.
Yeah.
Would. I think that's I think that because then you got size on the wing. You've got, I mean, man, but I don't know. That maybe puts you a bit too young at that point to compete right now. I don't know. It's a tough question. I think you're probably more likely to get 3 and Okafor or 3 and I don't know.
I think what happens is you deal 3 and you still pull your Jimmy Butler, and then you get Tatum at 4, and you look at Brown at the 2 and Tatum at the 3 coming off the bench, right? And you flip number 3, which is Josh Jackson, in some sort of a Bradley deal, whatever, and you Bradley Crowder deal or whatever. Yeah, and you bring in Butler, and then you basically have Tatum and Brown, competing for minutes in the starting lineup / off the bench at that wing, but with Brown likely getting the 2. But see, so many things could happen there, because if you get Paul George, Brown could play the 2 in the future. I'm not saying we get it next year, but you're obviously going to have to give up Bradley and Crowder and number 3. That's totally. You have to look at that. Or you have to look at that as sort of being what would be expected from either club. But if you get Butler, he can still play the 3. So if Brown has a great offseason and he gets inserted into the starting lineup, it really doesn't matter, Well, the only difference would be that they might still stay small, and you could almost get something crazy like Brown at the 2, Tatum at the 3, and Paul George playing the power forward alongside Horford at the 5. Like, there's so many different things they can do with these versatile wings. It's amazing.
The permutations of this are really endless. And that's really what we're talking about, which is, there's 100 different ways that this can go that are, well, I think that, and that's probably, there's 100 different ways this could go, and all of them are to the positive for the Boston Celtics, right? If you don't set your expectations that you're going to get the number 1 pick, right? You start, if you start lower and you say, look, the most likely pick the Boston Celtics get is 3. All right. The second most likely pick they get is 4. And then, you kind of work your way through that. Then you're like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't end up quite so bad. But if you go in and say it's going to be number 1, it's going to be number 1, you're likely disappointed by the odds. But, if you look at the Celtics history, let's just run it through quick. 97, 2007, 2014, 2000. You look at those situations, and every one of those It's until last year was the first time the Celtics actually did better in the lottery than they had before. First time that we waited at the commercial break as we were doing the show with bated breath saying, what is going to happen? And sure enough, they end up with the third pick. I don't think it's fatal. We haven't seen what Ben Simmons looks like, but they got the third pick. In 48 hours from now, well, as we're recording this, we'll know exactly who that person is or who their options are, and the permutations become slightly less numerous, which is probably a good thing for us trying to explain this to you over a podcast.
No doubt. And we're going to have to table Kawhi and Zaza because we've run out of time. But certainly there may be a double standard there. We could always revisit it on our next show. But everybody enjoy Game 7 tonight, the draft lottery tomorrow night, and then we'll be back here on Wednesday to recap what I would consider two of the biggest events that will decide the Celtics' short and long-term future. Are we going to be watching some more games? I certainly hope so. But that's going to do it for this week. The show will be available on demand on the CLNS Radio mobile app as well as clnsradio.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. Big thanks to everybody for tuning in. You can support the show by subscribing to Celtics Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. Please give us a rating and a review. Your feedback is important to us. And a reminder, today's show was brought to you by ZipRecruiter. They have a great deal for all of you listeners, but most importantly, you would be supporting our show, the entire CLNS Radio network, and just thank you as always to the loyal audience who makes this all worthwhile. For staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Radio, Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtics Stuff Live.
Celtics Stuff Live.